It's Friday, July 8th, 2011. I'm Kevin McShann, and this is the McShann Sports Beat Report.
All-star point guard from the New Jersey Nets, is planning to play in Turkey this fall if the NBA lockout has not been settled. Sources on Thursday today have confirmed that the same club that briefly had Allen Iverson on their team last year will now have Deron Williams. We welcome in NBA insider Mark Stein. Mark, what can you tell us about Deron Williams' apparent decision to play in Turkey in the fall?
Well, the trick with this thing is obviously a team has to be able to come up with enough money to convince a player of Deron Williams' stature to want to go to Turkey. But we saw last season that Besiktas, this club in Turkey, was very aggressive in getting Allen Iverson to come, and they've apparently assembled an offer lucrative enough to convince Deron Williams to go over there. Now, based on the letter of the law, he would need a letter of clearance from FIBA to play anywhere else. And when players are under contract to teams in the NBA, that typically doesn't happen. But the NBA Players Union has always maintained that it would legally fight any attempt by the NBA or FIBA to block locked out players from going elsewhere. So there isn't going to be any kind of contractual impediment. Deron Williams is going to be able to play in Turkey if that's what he wants to do. The risk is really anybody with guaranteed money on their contract, you're risking that if you go overseas. We've heard the same thing with Pau Gasol maybe going back to Spain. You put your guaranteed contract in the NBA at risk when you do that. So these guys are going to have to take insurance precautions to make sure that they protect the money that they are technically risking back in the NBA. But Deron Williams, this is from everything I hear, he's very serious about going there.
All right, Mark, the perception of European players playing overseas, really not that big of a deal. Could this deal for Williams touch off high-profile American players going overseas to play?
It's still too soon to say that we're going to see the floodgates open because the biggest impediment is money. There just aren't that many teams overseas that have the kind of financial resources to convince players from Deron Williams' zip code to go over there. We heard last week about the big offer from Real Madrid to Rudy Fernandez, but at this point, outside of China, there's really only a handful of teams around the world that can offer big money to get star names. Now, the fact that Deron Williams has made this decision so early and it's getting out, I'm sure a lot of guys are going to be calling their agents today and saying, what kind of offers are there out there for me? But I think it's still premature to say that we're going to see a mass exodus.
So, Mark, if we see other players leave to go overseas, could that in some way help the NBA lockout to speed up and end quicker?
I don't think there's any question because we didn't see this in 98, in the lockout of 98. We didn't see a mess of guys go over there. And certainly NBA teams, the Nets are not going to like the idea of Deron Williams even getting on a plane to Turkey, whether he dribbles the ball over there or not. So if NBA players can prove that they do have somewhere else to go to make a living, that unquestionably puts pressure on the owners to maybe change their stance. But from the NBA side, there's always been skepticism that how many teams in Europe are really going to be able to put offers on the table that are good enough to tempt stars. But let's be honest, nobody woke up today thinking that Deron Williams was going to even consider playing in Turkey. So if there are some more surprises like this in store, I think you're right. I think that could change. That could have an impact on labor talks.
During times of great uncertainty, having the ability to adjust and improvise is a critical quality you must possess in order to ensure your survival, and it appears as if New Jersey Nets All-Star guard Deron Williams has decided to take his talents overseas to play for Turkish team Besiktas, as the NBA's future for the upcoming season is up in the air. Team manager Murat Murtezaoglu told the Associated Press that talks with Williams, a former U.S. Olympian, were underway. Coach Ergin Ataman told the state-run Anatolia news agency that a deal with Williams was close. He also told the New York Times that a deal had been reached in principle. The Nets were unable to comment on Williams' situation because of the NBA lockout. The league has prohibited teams from discussing any player movement during the labor strife, which the owners initiated last week when the current collective bargaining agreement expired and the two sides were unable to close the gap to reach a new deal. Williams, who the Nets acquired in a blockbuster trade with the Utah Jazz in February, was scheduled to earn $16.36 million this season with New Jersey. His performance for the Nets was hindered this season because of a wrist injury, which required surgery. ESPN's senior NBA writer Mark Stein returns to tell us how Williams' decision has been received around the league and what this move means for other superstar players, such as the Lakers' Kobe Bryant.
Mark Stein broke the story. He joins us now on SportsCenter. Mark, what is the reaction this proposed move is receiving from those involved in the NBA?
It's created a lot of curiosity today, a lot of buzz. It's been a very quiet week. The lockout's basically a week old, and this thing is kind of a bolt out of the sky because there's always been the talk or the threat that star players were going to look to go overseas, but a team in Turkey, and not the most famous team in Turkey basketball-wise, for Besiktas to come out of the blue here and strike an agreement with Deron Williams, nobody saw it coming.
Only Mark knows the list of the Turkish teams from top to bottom. You know, someone has to be first, Mark. Do you think more players will follow his lead across the pond?
Well, the problem is there just isn't much evidence to suggest that the riches that used to be available to big names in the NBA if they wanted to go abroad, it's just not there by and large across Europe. There's still money in China, and this team, Besiktas in Turkey, they signed Iverson last year. They're trying to make big moves. As you mentioned, their coach wants to go after Kobe, but there just isn't the money there, and there's a lot of skepticism around the league that there will be multiple good job offers to convince NBA guys to go, because NBA guys who have guaranteed money, like Deron Williams has $34 million left on his contract, he is taking some risk here. If he were to suffer an injury, that money is not guaranteed. He's going to have to secure his own insurance, or the club will have to. Anybody with guaranteed money on their contract is taking a risk by going over and playing.
And Mark, you mentioned that the money is pretty tight overseas. The coach did say in passing he'd be interested in bringing Kobe Bryant to Istanbul as well. Are those just words, or is that a possibility?
I think we have to at least take him seriously and assume that he's going to get a meeting, because, again, if we had this conversation yesterday and you said Deron Williams is going to Turkey, I wouldn't have believed it, and nobody would have believed it. And let's also not forget, Kobe Bryant is a spokesman of Turkish Airlines. So if Turkish Airlines wants to pay some of the salary, and Besiktas is saying that sponsor dollars are paying a lot of Deron Williams' $5 million salary in this deal, if money comes from other places and the club doesn't have to foot the bill, who knows? Maybe they could assemble an offer that's big enough to at least get Kobe to listen.
Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser of ESPN's Pardon the Interruption discussed Williams' decision on Thursday and the impact it'll have on international basketball, and they also believe that it could act as a catalyst to get the NBA lockout over sooner.
We begin today with Deron Williams, NBA expatriate. The Nets guard has reportedly signed a deal to play in Turkey if the lockout continues unabated. He will reportedly make $200,000 a month, and he reportedly has an out whenever the NBA season starts. Move on, does this make sense to you?
Yes.
Further, Yahoo was reporting that the Turkish coach, Bryant as well. Do you think other NBA stars will follow Deron Williams?
Yes, I do.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really?
For a lot of reasons. They're going to pay you. You get an
Not
out,
much.
and you get the
Not
$200,000 a month. You're gonna make the case that's not better than nothing.
He
They're
makes
getting paid
$2
nothing.
million a month from the Nets.
But he's not making any from the Nets.
He didn't say
Because they're
any
not
money.
playing. That's not the point. He's not getting paid. If someone's going to give you $200,000 a month, you're not going to take it to do what you do
There's a
professionally?
tremendous risk involved for him
No risk
personally.
involved.
Yes, for him personally. At the end of this season coming up, he becomes a free agent if he chooses to opt out of a contract that pays him $16 million a year. What if he gets so hurt? What if it's a career-ending
You
injury?
get hurt in the summer. You get hurt anytime. The injury thing is bogus.
Players there aren't as good. The refereeing probably isn't as good.
Players
The conditions aren't as
here
good.
gain leverage. Not an advantage over the owners, but leverage they didn't have in 1999 when ownership pretty much, even though you wouldn't look at it by the salaries and say this, one, they made the players cave. The players are looking for something. If I am Billy Hunter, the union chief, I'm on the phone with teams in China leagues, South America.
Okay, do you think,
Bring
do you
my
think
guys.
Kobe Bryant will go?
Kobe Bryant was the first one to mention it. Now, he's got this knee situation.
Do you think
I
Dirk
think it depends on his health.
will go?
Why wouldn't he? He's from Europe.
I understand because he loves
So
playing
what,
in
if
America.
you have an out and you can come back, why wouldn't you go play
You
in
don't
Europe?
see any particular physical risk.
None. They practice. They're going to be playing. What's the risk?
I see this. And how many players are we talking about? What's the most they're going to pay? Limited amounts of
You know what?
players.
There's limited amounts of spots because some have quotas on Americans or just, foreign players
Right.
of them who come in, and there's salary cap limits. But I can see more than a handful, less than a bushel.
Bushel on a pack. And a hug around there.
Leverage is a tremendous tool to possess in any labor negotiations because it could potentially force the other side to soften their stance in order to get their dancing partner back at the table and on the same page with the news that Deron Williams has decided to take his talents overseas and play international basketball. The NBA and its owners ought to take notice of this latest development. The only questions that still remain are as follows. Will we see a mass exodus of NBA superstardom deciding to take some American flair to international basketball? And is there enough money to even entice these players to consider making the move? This is a story we'll undoubtedly keep our eye on all summer long as the NBA lockout persists to see if this is an aberration or a trend. Kevin McShann, Sports Beat, report.